All right, welcome to our next video in the series on programming VisiCalc. This is checkpoint 5. Our objective here is to create save and load functionality for our programs. So to recap where we are, we've got a program that can take input from the user, and importantly, we were able to start saying things like A1 equals 5, and what that would do is that would create a cell object. It would store the number 5 in that cell object. It would place it correctly somewhere on the grid. And at this point, our code should be able to handle putting in numbers, which would just arrive as cell objects in our two-dimensional array. We should also be able to handle text cells and date cells. So make sure you have those two things done. All right, at this point in the project, students usually recognize that testing code becomes very cumbersome. You make a change to your code, you want to see if it works, so you fire up VisiCalc and you have to type in A1 equals 5, A2 equals 3, A3 equals 10, and it usually gets to be a real pain in the backside. So what's the solution? How do we make this part go a little faster? Let's add some save and load functionality to our program so that we can so that it's not quite as difficult. When you want to test your code, you can just say load, the name of the file you want to load, and then it just loads it right in. So let's talk about how to accomplish these two tasks. Number one, how do we save? Well, you as the designer get to make a choice here. I've seen a few different strategies that I really like. I'll describe them. Strategy number one, I'm going to call save everything as you go. Well, what does this look like? It means that whenever a command is entered into the screen, I've seen students save it in a string array of commands. I've seen students save it in a string array list. Now, we haven't really talked about array lists yet, or maybe we're just about to, but you could take every command and just shove it in an array list. I've seen students write all of the commands into a file. So basically, every command that the user has input, you're saving somewhere. And when the time comes to save those commands to a file, we just dump them into a file. And if you've used the third option, that does mean transferring all the commands from one file to the one of the approved name. So to give you an idea of what this should look like, if I run my code, if I say A1 equals 5 and C4 equals boom, haha, get it? And let's see here, D9 equals 5, 11, 19, 52. Did I do all right? Excellent. And I print it out. Okay, it looks like this. If I say save mywork.txt, this command should recognize, all right, the first token was save. That means I'm trying to save. This is going to be the name of the file I want. And if that file doesn't exist, it's created. And these three commands that created this should appear in a file called Save My Work. Now, you look at my file navigator, you think to yourself, geez, I don't see anything there. Make sure you refresh, and you should be able to see, oops, refresh. There it is, mywork.txt, and there's all the commands that had made my files. All right, so let's break down. What is the other option is I've seen students do, when they say save, they traverse the grid and record all the values in the text file. Now, this is, when I built my VisiCalc this year, this is what I did. I found it useful to, if you're going to go this route, I would ask each cell to store as a field. Here, I'll put this on its own line. Ask each cell to store as a field the command that created it. Well, what do I mean by that? If I go look at my cell class right now, public cell, and then, we've got stuff in here. It's made up of state and behavior. And examples of behavior might be, the toString method maybe I built in to make sure it displays. Well, I think we've all got the ability to put an int in here, right? We've got some kind of int cell number, I think I called mine. I decided to add a piece of state. I think I called it command because I wanted to describe what is the command that created this cell. So when I made my new cell object, I stored in the number 5, whatever it was that was supposed to be there. But then command also held the string for me, A1 equals 5. So when I traversed the grid with a nested for loop, asking for, hey, cell, are you not null? Great. What was the command that created you? And then I recorded that command into a file. That's how I did it. Both techniques, whether you save as you go or when save is called at that moment, you search through the grid and record all the commands. Both are totally valid. Let's talk about if you're going to traverse what that nested for loop should look like. So this would be the cell class. Right here, if we are going to do array traversal, well, it should probably be, for int r equals 0, r less than, how many rows do we have? It's 10, r plus plus. And then if we say for int c equals 0, how many columns do we have? It's 7. We say c plus plus. And when we're in here, assuming we're doing the array traversal technique, we had to make a file that we were going to save to, and we got to be able to write to that file. So let's review that syntax. I might call this thing file save file equals new file. You should have in here the name specified by the user, right? If they said mywork.txt, well, that should be the name of the file. If it was apple or baloney txt, whatever it is, that should be the name of it. And then we also want a print stream object. I'm just going to call this one ps equals new print stream, and it's going to write to my save file. Recall that you're going to need to handle a throws file not found exception with this method and any other method that calls this method. That's thing to consider, number 1. And number 2, remember, you don't have to worry about creating the file. If you make a print stream that's aimed at the digital file object right here, as soon as we try to write to that file, if it didn't exist, it's created for us. If it did exist, then it's wiped clean and we record our new files in it. Right? So before we start traversing, we create a file object, we create the print stream, we set up nested for loops whose job it is to visit every element. And then the line of code that I won't give for you here, but you should be using your print stream. Well, you should check. If the cell is not null, use print stream to write to file the command that creates this cell. So you're checking on, depending on where you wrote this, spreadsheet of RC is what we want to know about. Hey, spreadsheet of RC at this location, are you null? If you're not null, then I need to write your command to the file. So that would be one way to handle that. I think that's everything I have to say about save. Let's talk about load. I think load is more interesting. So I want you to, it would be worth pausing the video this moment, running over, go check out your VisiCalc.java file, and I want to know, where are you processing your commands? Is it in the main method? Up until this point, if all of your commands have been processed in the main method, that's probably fine. But now that we're ready to add a load method, we want to pull some of that command processing out of the main method and make it its own method. In fact, I'm going to advocate that you have a method. It could look something like this. Public void process command string, string command. Okay. And the job of process command is it can get a command from the user input loop, which is probably in your main method, or it can get a command from a file. So your process command, right, it's checking a whole bunch of stuff. Was it quit? Was it, else? Is it, boy, what are all the things it can be at this point? Quit, help. And I also probably need to spell else correctly. If it's none of those things, how do we process a cell command like A1 equals 5, right? So we put all of this in here, and then when the time comes to make a load file method, which might look something like this, public void load file. Oh, I should mention if process command and load file are in your VisiCalc class, which would be a client, they're going to be static because the main method's going to call them. The main method's static. We're going to make these static. Public static void load file string file name. Probably looks a little something like this, right? Okay. So what we can do now is we can just open up a scanner. Well, let me think about this. I think we would have to redeclare a file object. We'd open a scanner to scan the file. And then we could use a while loop. We can like say while the file has next, keep calling next line to pull commands out of the file, and then you can just call process command on those commands. So it ends up being really clean rather than having to retype all of your if it's quit, if it's help, if it's process command. Well, whether the user's entering it or whether you're getting it from the file, we're going to be doing the same thing with it, right? A1 equals 5 should put a 5 here, whether the user said it or whether the file said it. So the main challenge for you in this checkpoint is definitely going to be if I've got all of my command processing logic in the main method, can I refactor that out, make process command its own method whose job it is to take that string command and then do that stuff with it. Okay, that's all I have for today. Thanks for watching.